In April 1988, John Demjanjuk, a retired auto worker, was found guilty by an Israeli court of being the Nazi death camp guard Ivan the Terrible, the man responsible for the torture and death of 850,000 people in the gas chambers at Treblinka in World War II. He was sentenced to death, but the case remains mired in controversy. The prosecution claims that Demjanjuk was caught by classic techniques of police work. To this day, the defense claims that Demjanjuk has been the victim of the most unreliable kind of evidence: identification by traumatized victims, errors of the lineup, and the identification parade. Tonight, we rebroadcast that documentary, first shown in January 1988. It examines the evidence that eventually convicted John Demjanjuk. An appeal is planned for next May, and between now and then, lawyers for both sides continue to prepare for that final judgment in Jerusalem. Jerusalem awakes with a call to prayer from every mosque. This is a holy city for three faiths: Muslims, Christians, and Jews. A city of peace torn by conflict in a country born out of the ashes of the Holocaust. And this year, Jerusalem is the setting for a historic war crimes trial. A Canadian lawyer, Paul Chumak, has come here to defend the man sitting in the dock. That man is John Demjanjuk, a retired auto worker from Cleveland, Ohio. And here you are, a Toronto lawyer, taking on the state of Israel, defending a man who's accused of killing Jews. I mean, this had to be a difficult decision for you.
Well, no question about it. It was a difficult decision. But I think the state of Israel and the world wants to know the truth, and that's what the purpose of the trial is, to ascertain the truth.
Israel's last war crimes trial convicted Adolf Eichmann, the administrator of Nazi Germany's final solution. 25 years later, another man leaves the same cell in Ayalon prison to make the 80-kilometer trip to a Jerusalem courtroom, perhaps to meet the same fate on the gallows.
Be careful of that.
John Demjanjuk is on trial for his life. It's described simply as Criminal Case 373, the State of Israel versus Ivan Demjanjuk. The trial started last February with capacity crowds lining up to get into this converted theater in Jerusalem. They came to catch a glimpse of a man whose neighbors and priests back home in Cleveland describe as one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. But here, he's accused of being Ivan the Terrible, who murdered 850,000 Jews. John Demjanjuk says he's not that man. Chumak spent 17 years in Ontario, sending criminals to jail as a Crown prosecutor. Here, he's on the defense side for the first time in his life, trying to convince the judges his client is not guilty.
He's an ordinary, simple man. He's a very, very simple man. He absolutely and vehemently denies any wrongdoing. I'm convinced he's innocent, having spoken to him, having heard his evidence, having reviewed the evidence which the prosecution has put forward. And this may very well be a case where a man has simply been caught up in historical events which are far, far beyond his comprehension, and where he was simply the wrong man at the wrong time at the wrong place.
But you don't have to prove that he isn't Ivan the Terrible.
No, the defense simply has to raise a reasonable doubt, and I believe we may very well do that.
Whether or not the defense can do that will be decided in the courtroom by 3 Israeli judges. Seated below the pictures of the Treblinka death camp is the 8-person prosecution team. Across the court sits the defense: John Gill from Cleveland and Israeli lawyer Yoram Shaftel have been with the case since it began a year ago. Chumak joined them this summer after the Demjanjuk family fired the lead counsel.
If you could move on then, Doctor, if you finished with point number 1.
Chumak says taking the case was not an easy decision. So you decided to fly in the face of the advice of close friends who said, Paul, don't touch this.
Yes, for instance, my parents didn't want me to take the case, just by way of example, because they're older people. They don't want to have any more aggravation in their lives, I think. That's a good word, yes. A lot of my very good friends said don't touch it, because this is the type of case which is very, very difficult. From the emotional perspective, I think this case is difficult for everyone, and not just for myself. I would certainly be less than frank if I were not to say that it is a very, very difficult case emotionally. I don't think there's been another case in the history of mankind where one individual has been charged with mass murder involving so many hundreds of thousands of people.
Eichmann, Barbie.
Yes, but Eichmann was what has been referred to as a white-collar killer. Eichmann signed the orders. Eichmann prepared the commands. Eichmann prepared the political philosophy. This man allegedly did the deed with his own hands. He is a doer. He is not an office worker.
Would you have taken the case? I mean, every man deserves a defense, but would you have taken the case if this particular man told you that he was this person responsible for murdering almost 1 million Jews? He too deserves a defense.
He does deserve a defense. Eichmann was represented by a German lawyer.
Would you have been able to do it?
I'd have to think about that. I'd have to think about it.
In the winter of 1942, Nazi Germany set into motion the plan for the extermination of Eastern European Jewry. Millions of Jews were rounded up from the ghettos, herded into railway cars, and transported to death camps. One of them was Treblinka, 60 kilometers from Warsaw. Treblinka was a killing factory. From July 1942 to September 1943, 6,000 Jews a day were slaughtered here with bloody efficiency. Within an hour of leaving the trains, they were dead. At the entrance to this gas chamber stood a sadistic guard who tortured and mutilated his victims before starting the engines that poured out the gas. He came to be known as Ivan Grozny, Ivan the Terrible. 45 years later, the trial will decide if this 67-year-old grandfather was that man.
I very nearly rubbed shoulders with him. How is that possible? Witness, well, he was passing...
Pinchas Epstein survived Treblinka. For almost a year, he was forced to carry bodies from the gas chambers to the burial pits. At the trial, he relived the horror that was Treblinka.
Near the gas chambers, and I would come to the gas chambers in order to pick up the corpses, and he was there all the time. After the corpses were taken out of the gas chambers, he would stand there and he would look at the results of what he had done to them, this gouging of eyes, the cutting off of parts of a girl's breasts. He was standing there enjoying his handiwork, and women who were pregnant with stabbed wounds in the abdomen. I have no words. I cannot, Your Honor, really not describe this. A man's healthy brain cannot take in, cannot grasp what went on at Treblinka. It is not on this planet. Almost 1 million people were massacred, assassinated. Women, children, old people. Why, I ask? Why? Because they were Jews.
To walk into that courtroom, you know, when I walked in to that courtroom in Jerusalem, it was so incredibly difficult just to sit there, you know, just to see the pictures of Treblinka. You know, I've been involved in murder trials, but never anything like this. This just strikes right at the very heart of your soul, because, you know, before I'm a lawyer, I'm a human being. You know, to be involved in a case where women have been murdered, children have been murdered, innocent people have been murdered, and not 10 or 20, but by the hundreds of thousands, it just shocks the conscience.
Demjanjuk was brought to Israel 21 months ago. He had lived a quiet life in Cleveland for 36 years. A retired auto worker, he was a pillar of the Ukrainian community, a family man, and a regular churchgoer. In 1979, during a search in the United States for death camp guards, 5 Treblinka survivors identified the man in a 1951 picture of John Demjanjuk as being Ivan the Terrible. Demjanjuk was stripped of his citizenship by an American court, which found that he had lied about his past when he entered the United States in 1952. The court found he was the Treblinka death camp guard known as Ivan the Terrible. Demjanjuk was extradited to face the criminal charges in Israel.
You did the groundwork to extradite. You helped prepare the indictment.
Israeli lawyer Dennis Goldman handled Demjanjuk's extradition, prepared the indictment, and is a former member of the prosecution team.
When you were working on this case, did you think you had enough evidence to convict John Demjanjuk?
Obviously, if we hadn't thought that the evidence against him was strong, we would not have commenced the proceedings against him. I think, as you know, the courts in the United States also deprived him of his American nationality. And in so doing, they also expressed the opinion that there was firm and convincing evidence against him to show that he was the person known as Ivan the Terrible in Treblinka.
Demjanjuk's trial was more than a court case. It was the biggest attraction in Israel. They stood in line for hours. Some came to see a man accused of unspeakable crimes. The old came to remember. The young came to learn. For those who couldn't attend, daily live broadcasts were carried on Israeli television and radio. 200 foreign journalists kept the world informed. Even Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir came to be part of this historic event.
Humanity has to know that the destiny, it is a call of the destiny to bring all such criminals to trial.
And you are cautioned that you have to...
Emotions were running very high when the trial began, and Demjanjuk's Israeli lawyer, Yoram Shaftel, thought that the verdict was being taken for granted.
One of the most distinguished jurists in this country, 2 months before the case started, and I refer to Judge Chaim Cohen, ex-vice president of the Israeli Supreme Court, stated that he is very much afraid that the Israeli court will not have the courage to issue a non-guilty sentence to Demjanjuk because of intense public and media pressure for conviction. People say that no one is indicted unless something stinks, and if someone is sitting on the accused bench, it's because he deserves to be there. I would say 95%, maybe 98% of the people in Israel, when the case started, and during the first few months, were sure that the defendant is Ivan the Terrible.
For John Demjanjuk to be found guilty, the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he is Ivan the Terrible. Treblinka was destroyed in the fall of 1943, so no trace of its existence survives, except in the memories of those Jews who escaped. At the core of the prosecution case are 5 people who survived the horrors of Treblinka.
Where were the naked men once you were inside the compound, those who were going to their death?
On trial, too, is their ability to remember things that happened half a lifetime ago. Eliyahu Rosenberg testified that as a corpse carrier at Treblinka, he had witnessed Ivan's butchery.
Him holding a sort of sword in his hand, sort of sword. Sometimes he was cut off a piece of nose, a piece of ear, stabbed. You just cannot comprehend why.
After 45 years, could he identify John Demjanjuk as Ivan the Terrible?
Bench. Mr. Rosenberg, what is your answer? Just a moment, Mr. Rosenberg.
Rosenberg, come over. Stand up, John.
Boy, Rosenberg.
Mr. Rosenberg, please sit down. The public is requested to keep to its seat. Mr. Rosenberg, please return to your witness stand.
The anguish of the moment was too much for Rosenberg's wife.
Justice, and it...
As the courtroom waited for his answer, she had to be helped out.
Mr. Choquette, kindly repeat the question. Prosecution. The question was, who is the man sitting in the dock? Witness, Ivan, I say unhesitatingly and without the slightest doubts. This is Ivan from the gas chambers, the man I am now looking at. I saw his eyes. I saw those murderous eyes. I saw that face of his. How dare you put out your hand to me, murderer that you are? Bench, Mr. Rosenberg.
4 other Treblinka survivors made the same identification. How do you fight against an eyewitness who walks up to Mr. Demjanjuk, points in his face, and says, "This is Ivan the Terrible"?
In terms of drama, in terms of courtroom drama, in terms of theater, that is very powerful. In terms of the law, in terms of the evidentiary value, it is not very significant. The law indicates that if a witness comes up and points the finger at someone, we're not saying that witness is a liar. We're not saying that person comes to court perjuring himself. All the defense is saying is that this person has an honest but mistaken belief. So this person honestly believes that he is identifying Ivan the Terrible, but he's mistaken. In Chicago, 11 witnesses identified Frank Wallace as being the Beast of Calais. They said that man slaughtered a woman, shot her baby, before our eyes. I was 3 feet away from him. They were all wrong. Mr. Wallace is as innocent as you or I. Demjanjuk is saying the same thing. He's saying, I bleed for the Holocaust, I bleed for the people that have suffered, but I'm not the man.
Memory is the key in this case, so the defense went to Elizabeth Loftus. She's one of the top memory specialists in the world. A psychologist at the University of Washington in Seattle, her testimony on eyewitness identification has been heard in 150 cases.
It's extremely powerful testimony. It's very persuasive. It's extremely hard to resist it. And yet there are cases where exactly that kind of testimony has been given, but it's been a mistake.
I think there's a sense, though, that some horrible, traumatic event somehow solidifies the memory in a victim's mind. Is that not true?
Well, that's a common belief. It's a common belief among people in general, and jurors in particular, or judges, triers of fact, that when you experience something very traumatic and frightening, that it will cause a kind of indelible fixation in the mind. In fact, the research that I and others have done shows that quite the opposite can be the case.
The defense asked Loftus to go to Jerusalem to testify on the reliability of the survivors' memories. She believed there were problems with the original identifications made on the basis of the 1951 photograph of Demjanjuk, but could not bring herself to testify for the defense.
It was something about being Jewish. I just wasn't sure that I wanted to work on this case. My uncle, who is 86 years old now, he was 85 at the time. I mean, in so many words, he said, "Don't let this be the last thing you do before I die." My closest friend, devastated by the idea that I might testify on behalf of any defendant accused of being a Nazi war criminal.
On the one hand, you as a scientist felt perhaps you had some information you could offer, and on the other hand, friends and relatives were saying, "Don't do this"?
Yeah, it was friends and relatives saying that, but also something in myself was saying it too. These few people who miraculously survived the worst kind of experience that anyone could imagine, and the idea that I might testify in court in a way that would suggest that we shouldn't believe them, that was part of the other side of my decision too.
But is that the same thing suggesting that their memories after 45 years are perhaps not totally accurate, does that deny their experience?
Well, I don't think it denies their experience at all, but I don't think it's so clear that in their minds it wouldn't be denying their experience.
Israeli lawyer Yoram Shaftel knew that being a Jew defending an alleged Nazi war criminal would create problems for him too.
I knew very well that I'm going to be disliked, in the beginning at least. I'm going to be attacked, but my nature is like this, that only this encourage my willingness to step into such a case.
But you've been getting death threats, warnings.
Warnings, yes, here and there death threats, but I didn't take them seriously.
But there obviously is a constituency out there that is not too pleased with what you are doing in principle.
Yes, but you know, the Israeli society is not kind of a society that if the society is not pleased with what you're doing, they're going to kill you.
How are you today?
Good, thank you. I'm good all the time.
For 10 years, Demjanjuk has said he was not a Nazi guard at Treblinka. In fact, he told the court he himself was a prisoner of the Germans. While in the Russian army, he was captured in Crimea in 1942 and claims he sat most of the war out in prisoner of war camps in Poland and Austria.
I have never in my life been at Treblinka, Sobibor, or Travniki. Please believe me, and do not put a noose around my neck for what was perpetrated by others.
As it turns out, John Demjanjuk is not the best witness in his own defense. The prosecution has documented over a dozen inconsistencies in his testimony, and Demjanjuk has faltered over names, dates, and places. In trying to provide an answer, he has only raised another question. Has his own memory let him down after 45 years, or is he lying? There have been real inconsistencies and gaps in his biography, in his story. This has got to be a problem for you.
I would think that if you would take a survey or statistics of people who went through the war, went through the horrors of the famine, as John Demjanjuk went through, where the communists, the Russians murdered more than 7 million Ukrainians, where he went through the German prisoners of war camps, where he was deprived of food and nutrition. As a matter of fact, when he was testifying, he said he didn't know one day from the next. So in terms of time, recollection, detail, there is a lot of fog, and there has to be. As a matter of fact, I would think that that goes more to show that he's telling the truth, because if he was
So you're characterizing him as a victim?
Absolutely. I would think that if he would come forward to court with a story which was detailed, precise, and concise, and which accounted for every minute of where he was, I think that would be highly suspicious as being orchestrated and as having been thought up by somebody.
Demjanjuk's own testimony has been the major problem in his defense. John Gill and Paul Chumak are now back in Jerusalem. They have traveled North America and Europe looking for someone, anyone who could support his story. But no one has been found who remembers John Demjanjuk from any place other than the Treblinka death camp.
In Holm, where he said he was a prisoner of war, there were over, I think, 220,000 prisoners of war, and I think 200,000 of them died. So that a lot of people have died since those days. And what if, for instance, there were witnesses who could have been called who died? Again, we are talking about a prosecution which is taking place 45 years after the event, which is exceedingly difficult.
Chumak has spent more time in airplanes than in the courtroom. He has so little time and so few leads, he feels obliged to track down as many as he can. On this day, he's traveled to New York to interview a potential witness. Playing detective is a new role for Chumak. As a Crown prosecutor in Canada, he rarely had to do his own legwork. He's on his way to talk to Frank Stiffel, one of only 50 living survivors of Treblinka. 5 of those have identified John Demjanjuk as Ivan. 17 others, looking at photographs, have been unable to do so. But no survivor has yet entered the witness box to swear the man on trial is not Ivan the Terrible. Could Frank Stiffel be the first one?
Please come. Thank you very much. May you sit down, please.
Stiffel tells Chumak that he escaped from Treblinka in a railway car, bundled up in the clothing taken from the gas chamber victims. He and his entire family were in Treblinka in September 1942. He will never forget the moment of their arrival.
They were ordered to undress in the quad, and they entered. It was a long barracks where the women had undressed. The women undressed inside, men outside. And men were ordered to enter a little gate. Everything was made out of pines, cut pine branches intertwined in barbed wire fence. And there was a small gate, and this is where they entered. And that was the last time I saw my father, as he was the last person of that transport to enter that gate, naked.
That extermination area, the killing camp.
That's right.
I see. I'll show you 2 photographs. The first photograph is a photograph from 1942, Treblinka identified.
Chumak shows him a photograph that other Treblinka survivors have already identified.
Have you seen a person like that when you were in Treblinka? A person that looks like that?
I don't think so. No.
I'm showing you another photograph of, let's just put these pictures here, of Mr.
Stiffel can't help Chumak. If he ever did come face to face with the man other survivors have identified as the guard at Treblinka, he does not remember him. Stiffel cannot tell Chumak if the man in the picture is or isn't Ivan the Terrible. Trying to uncover a trail that is 45 years old is difficult and expensive. Demjanjuk's defense will cost over $1 million, and the only real source of money comes from donations. The Demjanjuk family has spent the last 5 years out campaigning for support in the North American Ukrainian community. Now that's being helped by Paul Chumak's presence on the defense team. The family did decide to stay in their own community, ultimately. It's not a coincidence that they hired Paul Chumak.
Well, as I've said, they've tried to go outside of the community. They were unsuccessful. And then they approached me.
Who is paying the defense costs? Who's paying your salary?
Well, they have a defense fund. They've been raising money in Canada and in the United States. I think in Canada they raised over $400,000. That was the last figure that I'd heard.
Where did they get $400,000?
Donations.
From whom? Primarily?
From little old ladies and from the community.
From the Ukrainian community?
From the Ukrainian community, yes, primarily.
So there must be some pressure on you as a Ukrainian supported by Ukrainian funds.
I don't feel that. I don't feel any pressure whatsoever from the community, if I could put it in that broad sense. I have a duty to the court, and I have a duty to my client, and that's it.
Сучасні отці, вельмишановні гості, дорогі пані і панове.
Demjanjuk's son tells this Ukrainian gathering in Toronto that the Soviet Union supplied the critical document in the case against his father. It's an SS card which the Soviets say fell into the hands of their advancing army. The Soviet Union sent it to the United States in 1980 during its prosecution of Demjanjuk. The card places Demjanjuk at the Treblinka camp in Nazi-occupied Poland. It was where guards were trained for duty at Treblinka and the other death camps. He tells this crowd the card is a forgery. Why does the Ukrainian community take this trial so personally?
I think there are a number of reasons. Firstly is the fact that the Soviet Union has instigated this particular prosecution. Were it not for the introduction of the Soviet-supplied evidence, that is the Treblinka identification card, Mr. Demjanjuk would be home in Cleveland, Ohio. The Ukrainian community is very, very suspicious of Soviet motives and indeed mistrusts the Soviet Union.
Why would the Soviet Union go after John Demjanjuk? He wasn't a dissident. He wasn't a vocal anti-Soviet campaigner.
They want to discredit the entire Ukrainian emigre community in Canada and the States. They want to paint every Ukrainian with a fascist brush. That is their intention. So the people, when they meet Ukrainians, they will immediately assume that they are fascists.
The card is the most controversial piece of evidence in the trial. More than a dozen experts, including forensic scientists, chemists, and ink specialists, have battled over its authenticity. Hours have been spent debating the composition of ink dyes and even the type of paper clips the Nazis used during the war. The defense argues the card is a KGB forgery. The prosecution says it's a genuine Nazi document.
What is important here is the intrinsic validity or invalidity of that card. Before making that card a part of its prosecution evidence, the prosecution took every step by consulting world-renowned experts to try and determine whether or not that card was genuine. They believe, as a result of expert opinion, the card is in fact genuine. So the fact that it came either from the Soviet Union or from any place elsewhere, or whether it was found in the dustbin, is not really relevant.
In my opinion, the line of the defense is more political.
Heike Grossman was a member of the Jewish resistance in Poland during the Second World War and is now a member of the Knesset. She says it's not the identity card that may convict Demjanjuk, but the inconsistencies in his own alibi.
2 years. The very, very important years do not exist in his biography. He has forgot what happened in these 2 years. So the defense must do something about it. What happened with Demjanjuk in these 2 years? Why his memories are so weak?
There's been more dramatic evidence at the trial in Jerusalem of the alleged Nazi war criminal John Demjanjuk.
Last spring, a prosecution witness made news around the world.
But today, an expert from Britain was in court, and she identified Demjanjuk positively as the dreaded Ivan the Terrible, the gas chamber operator at the Treblinka death camp in wartime Poland. An anthropologist, Patricia Smith, presented evidence that could mean death for Demjanjuk, and she did it with the aid of photographs. She asked the court to compare a wartime German ID card with the real Ivan the Terrible, with a photograph of Demjanjuk taken only a few months ago. Here's what the prosecution witness said about the subject's skull, forehead, nose, and other features.
There can be no shadow of doubt but that we are dealing with the same individual. In the photographs and carry out...
Smith's video superimposition technique devastated the defense and sent them scrambling to try to undermine her testimony. Chumak tracked down an expert he thought could help discredit Smith. Dr. Yasmar Ishjan, a Miami forensic anthropologist, frequently assists the police in difficult identification cases. Chumak brought him to Israel.
And particularly these 24 features that are indicated in
the photograph on the card supplied by the Soviet Union resembles Demjanjuk. But does Smith's superimposition technique prove the pictures were all of the same man?
Like that, and the lip thickness.
They look for weaknesses in Smith's matching of the three faces in the photographs. Every feature is carefully compared.
Can you tell in this photograph whether it's attached, the earlobe, or not?
It seems not, but I cannot use this as a positive evidence of saying, yes, it is attached, or no, it is not attached.
Would that be important, as an important identifying feature, that particular area of the body?
Well, it's important to say that they are not the same people. If, for example, this is attached here, and not attached there, and automatically we can say that they are not the same people.
Now, the picture of him at 20...
The defense team meets with Ishjan to review a videotape he has produced. For this superimposition, Ishjan compares the face on the Soviet Trawniki card not with Demjanjuk, but with a 60-year-old Florida lab technician who has similar facial features.
This is not bad at all.
No, this is very good.
You're comparing a young, dynamic person. Look at this.
Look at this.
Eyebrows go perfect. But the face now is narrow, you see?
Yes.
So everybody went immediately for this proportional matching, that is, the matching of the mouth.
Ishjan's videotape satisfies them that the superimposition technique can make two faces that are not the same look as if they are.
But what they did, they just showed us just a particular strip like that, and everybody was so impressed with this. They said, this is magic.
You know what's good about it is to demonstrate the difference between 20 and 60,
yes,
and to show how ridiculous these witnesses are saying.
That's right. That's it.
In the courtroom 4 days later, Chumak asks Ishjan the critical question.
One question, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Doctor, taking into account all of your observations which you have just given us, what is your opinion with regard to the positive identification of photograph 1, the Trawniki photo, in Dr. Patricia Smith videotape?
The problem is that the superimposition process does not show precisely how the two images coincide with each other. Therefore, this process, the result is indeterminate.
I'd like to call the FBI, and I'd like to get the investigator that prepared this report and call him when the judges next convene the court. And I'm sure
Chumak tells the other members of the defense team that he has turned up two reports commissioned by the prosecution witness, Pat Smith.
You see, a private letter.
And
a private letter.
And Don Ordner's opinion also coincides with our expert.
Yeah.
So there are two expert opinions, and both of them...
The two reports disagree with Smith's conclusions, and so were never entered into evidence. Chumak wants to find a way to get them before the court.
If the court will not accept it without a witness, then the best way to put this material, to my opinion, is through Pat Smith.
Can I cross-examine her, though?
Yes.
I'd like a piece of her. You know what I mean, Chef?
Pleasure, you can have it.
Because I think we can have some
She's
fun.
not such a big mitzvah, as they say in Yiddish.
Yeah, but listen, I think we can have some fun.
Mitzvah.
But Sheffy, we can have some fun with her, you know, because after all, she prepares an opinion, her own opinion. In her opinion, she says it's a positive identification. And two experts gave her opinions, one from the FBI and one Dr. Ordner from the National Museum of Natural History from the Smithsonian Institute, and they both contradict her own opinion.
Yes.
And she buried these two opinions. She did not testify about them in court, and nobody would have known about it had we not discovered this by coincidence. And the prosecution buried this material.
Yeah.
Talk about ethics. And it's difficult.
The courtroom tactics are ordinary, but the case is not.
Don't think for a moment that I can come home or back to my hotel and just carry on as if I was defending a drunk driver or as if I was defending a petty thief. This is a very difficult case. I think that in terms of its impact and its the number of hours that I've put in and the toll on me, it's certainly taken a much greater toll than any other case possibly could.
Have you ever regretted it?
I've thought to myself that if I wanted an easy lifestyle, I should have stayed in Canada and did the ordinary type of case. In terms of regret, some days when I work exceedingly hard, I think to myself, what am I doing here? You know, I've never had anything to do with Nazis. I've never had anything to do with killers of that magnitude. I think Demjanjuk is innocent. That's the only thing that keeps me in the case.
11 months into the trial, interest has lagged and the crowds have dwindled. Rather than the horrors of the Holocaust, the audience can only expect to hear a lecture on subjects like Cyrillic lettering. Questions are being raised in Israel about the value of the Demjanjuk trial. Yuri Avneri fears that what was meant to be a historic chapter in the story of the Holocaust has become a messy little footnote. He's a former member of the Knesset and the editor of the weekly news magazine, This World.
Well, most people would agree that the Holocaust should be remembered and it should be a part of education in Israel. But the question is whether such a trial really does the job. The Eichmann trial did. The Eichmann trial is very difficult today to realize what it was. The Eichmann trial was shook up Israel completely. For the first time, the whole fact of the Holocaust was really absorbed by Israeli consciousness, and therefore it was a unique psychological experience.
And how would you characterize the Demjanjuk trial then?
Nothing compared to it, absolutely nothing. It's becoming a kind of a parlor game. People are talking about it at home, at work, and so on. I mean, it's a big event. So the whole discussion is not anymore what happened in Treblinka, what happened during the Holocaust. The whole discussion is this man, do you believe he is or don't you believe he is that man? Do you believe that photo? Do you think that photo? It's a very good subject for conversation that's Saturday night in Israel. But as I said before, it's taking away the uniqueness of the Holocaust. It's taking away the you could nearly say the satanic majesty of the Holocaust. It's turning it into something unimportant.
You had a very loud voice, and you had some clout. Why did anybody listen to you when you said, no, don't take John Demjanjuk, don't try him?
I was not the only one. There were quite a number of people who but as you said before, it's very difficult to argue with the sheer naked strength of feeling of the people who have been to the Holocaust, for whom think, let's have the man and let's judge him and let's hang him, was such a natural reaction.
At Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, the flame burns eternally for the victims of the death camps. With the passage of time, justice for those victims may prove to be elusive.
This case demonstrates how complicated it is to try a man alleged to commit crimes 45 years ago.
Defense lawyer Yoram Shaftel.
It proved that the thing is so complicated that I'm sure that unless a distinguished war criminal like Mengele, if he would be fined, no other case of this character will be ever tried in Israel, definitely not of a guard in a concentration camp, definitely not.
Given the way this trial has gone, do you think Israel, it will be a long time before there's another Nazi war crime trial in Israel, and that the government, the Department of Justice, will be a little bit more circumspect in who they decide to bring to trial?
I don't think it wasn't circumspect in deciding to bring Demjanjuk to trial. Certainly the Ministry of Justice will perhaps learn lessons from the Demjanjuk proceeding, but I don't think it will in any way. I don't think it will affect in one way or the other its willingness to seek further trials if there's a suitable accused and a suitable package of evidence against him.
Paul Chumak gets away from the Demjanjuk trial to his farm just outside Toronto. But Canada may soon be conducting war crime trials of its own. The Duchesne Commission report has recommended the prosecution of Nazi war criminals living in Canada. Chumak is tight-lipped about his involvement in those trials, but he thinks there may be problems with the Canadian prosecutions. So what are we looking at?
Well, if Demjanjuk were to be tried in Canada, for instance, we'd be looking at a 2-year trial. Jurors would have to be off work and they'd have to sit in a courtroom and listen to the evidence for perhaps 2 years. We're looking at exceedingly protracted proceedings in some cases. And in Canada, we're probably looking at all sorts of constitutional attacks on the law. In other words, by virtue of the Constitution, an accused has the right to be tried within a reasonable time. And if an alleged Nazi war criminal is brought to trial here, he can say, this is not reasonable for me to be tried 45 years after the event.
Next week, the prosecution and defense will make their final arguments about whether John Demjanjuk is or is not Ivan the Terrible. After considering 20,000 pages of testimony, the judges must make the choice.
I'm not the Ivan the Terrible. I'm a good man.
To my mind, no conclusive proof beyond any reasonable doubt that he is, nor that he is not. And I wonder how the judges... in ordinary trial, someone is accused of murder, you can change it to manslaughter, you can change to this or that, you can sentence him to life, you can sentence him to 1 year in prison. Here, it's either he is or he is not. If he is, he must be hanged. If he is not, what do you do with him? What do you put him in a kibbutz? What do you do with him? You can't send him to prison. If he has been taking part in killing hundreds of thousands of Jews, public opinion in Israel would not tolerate any other sentence than death.
But will there be satisfactory resolution to this case? Will it make Israelis happy? Will it make Ukrainians happy? Will it make Demjanjuk and his family happy? The best you will come out with is doubt. We'll never know if he is. We'll never know if he isn't.
That's correct. That in terms of, especially since the case is so old, when we look at evidence from 1942, from 1943, when we look at evidence which is 45 years old, it is very difficult to follow a trail. So there's no question but that when you look at a case which is so old, there may very well never be a complete finding of absolute truth, that this is in fact what happened. Demjanjuk's case is perhaps unique in the history of criminal justice.
Well, he was convicted, sentenced to death, but I assume in these kind of cases there are appeals that go on forever.
There are, and circumstances surrounding it are very mysterious and bizarre. Before the appeal even got to court, one of Demjanjuk's lawyers went out a 15th-story window in a hotel in Jerusalem. The police say it was suicide. At the man's funeral, another defense attorney, Yoram Shaftel, gets acid thrown in his face by a survivor of Treblinka. The appeal is delayed again. Suddenly, very mysteriously, some documents turn up in a garbage can in Washington that suggests the Americans intentionally withheld information that could have helped Demjanjuk. Now the appeal will be heard May 1990.
The Fifth Estate will return.